and welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. By his own admission, Ben Gumbleton makes quite a bit of music that falls into the Dreamtronica genre. What is Dreamtronica, you ask? Well, you might want to give Boo Seeka a listen if you want an answer to that. Largely helmed by Ben, or Boo as he's commonly known, Boo Seeka has been on the scene since 2015, with a number of different collaborators working with Ben along the way. These days, it's a duo which also features Jay Bainbridge of Golding, and together they make some music which is equal parts powerful, progressive, and reflective. It all kicked off with Never Too Soon back in 2017, which hit number 8 on the Aussie charts. In 2022, we received Between the Head and the Heart, and just this year, we saw the release of Midnight Highlight. No matter which part of the Boo Seeka story you join in on, you can be sure that you're receiving music which is the result of creatives who are pushing themselves to hit lofty new heights. Ahead of the end of their run of Aussie shows, and a few months before they head off to North America with Boy and Bear, Ben Gumbleton was kind enough to spend some of his time talking through the Boo Seeka story and opening up about his musical process. I implore you to check out Boo Seeka's Midnight Highlight, and once you're done giving that a spin, have a listen to my chat with Ben, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. And Gumbleton, thank you for joining the Trusty Chords podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, to introduce yourself to people who might not know your name, can you give me a quick few words on who you are and why you're here today?
So I am known as an artist one half of an artist called Boo Seeka. An Australian, I got told I'm called Dreamtronica music. I don't even know if anyone else has ever called themselves that, but my first manager came up with that, so I've been running with it for the last 8-9 years.
It served you well so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
And so this podcast is one that revolves around a love of music. So what I love to do is go back to those early days and chat about when that spark first occurred. So for you, Ben, do you have any particular early memories of when music first resonated with you?
I'd say my path was the same as, a lot of other artists. Mine definitely came from my parents. Mum and Dad always had a very big record collection. Yes, there was TV in my life, but it was mainly, waking up to music playing in the afternoon, get in the car, music playing again. So always surrounded by music and growing up with, all the classics of like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. And my mother was a huge fan of Tracy Chapman. My dad, more so if it was just him, was we always had Supertramp or ELO or Bread or America playing in the car with Dad. So I think a lot of music that I grew up with was very melodic, which I think has been a big part on the path that I took on writing music. So yeah, that was definitely my upbringing. And then Mum and Dad, I don't think really thought that much of it, but they could see that I loved music. They got me a second-hand guitar. I think they had 5 strings on it at the point of when I was about 7 or 8. And yeah, didn't think that, it was just a present that they thought of. And I just consistently sitting in front of the speakers, just trying to figure out what I was hearing through the speakers. And that's where my love of music came from, I think. And Mum and Dad never really pushed me into doing lessons. It was just all kind of from what I was hearing. And I went and had a guitar lesson one day, and the guitar teacher got really frustrated with me after the first lesson, because he's like, he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't know what he's doing. So I think just let him do his thing. So that's kind of been my whole thing. I can't read music. I've never had a vocal lesson in my life. I just listen and figure it out. I can't read, so there's no point of putting music in front of me, sheets of music, because I'm not going to be able to figure it out. So that's been my way of figuring out music for the last since I was 8, I guess.
So as a fellow musician, obviously not to the same level as you, you're one of the people that we call incredibly frustrating, in that you're just so naturally talented. You just have that sort of ability to sort of.
But honestly, I wish I could read sheet music, but to me, it's all gibberish to me. I've tried, I know the basic chords and stuff like that, but I have a lot of friends that are incredible at reading sheet music, and it's amazing just to see them see a sheet of music and they just play it instantly, which is incredible. Where for me, I just need to listen to it and then I'll figure it out.
I understand. I mean, I mean, personally, I'm someone who can fumble their way around some sheet music, but I'm going to need about 3 to 5 business days, sort of, to make sure I can get through it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but obviously, with that sort of early exposure to music, was there ever a sort of a point in your life where you sort of said, "Hey, when I grow up, I actually want to really be playing music"?
Yeah, I think I got absolutely hooked, I guess, when my mum took me to my first ever two concerts was Matchbox 20, and then I think a month later we went and saw John Mayer. We were living in Tamworth at the time, so my dad was working at um, Coca-Cola, and they have the Tamworth Country Music Festival every year, and Dad was a big part of that. So I was kind of exposed to live music happening at that point. I don't think I really caught on to country music very quickly, but when I went and saw Matchbox 20 and John Mayer, I think that was the point where I was like, I want to do this. So
Because
yeah.
actually, that's always something I find really fascinating is that a lot of people sort of look at artists, especially like Matchbox 20, as sort of being, and it's a pejorative term, wuss rock. But I love Matchbox 20. They're still such a great band. They really hold up. But I mean, obviously something like that, as a young, say young kid or as a youngster, sort of getting into music, I'm assuming, the likes of Rob Thomas is such a, brilliant voice, and just the rest of the band that would sort of say, this is what's possible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think like each to their own. I know that Rob Thomas and old Matchbox 20 and John Mayer isn't everyone's cup of tea. And to be honest, I wouldn't say that I pull out their CDs and listen to them all the time now. But that was definitely a defying moment in my life where it was the first time going and seeing a concert in 5.5, I think it was 7,500 people at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre, and just being absolutely blown away of 7,500 people singing along to these songs that I've been only hearing coming out of the car stereo with mum and dad. So it was just this infectious thing that from there on in I was always annoying mum and dad to go to more and more concerts, and they loved it. They thought it was great. But they're massive music lovers, and I think that was another connection with my parents through the years of um, you know them kind of learning about the music that was coming up that I was listening to as a young kid. I mean, I remember my first CD that I ever bought. I saw something, I think MTV, and it was The Offspring, and mum's like, oh, I might have to listen to that with you first because there's explicit language. And I remember sitting in front of the stereo with mum and dad listening to this record, and they were swearing, and yeah, mum and dad were pretty cool at an age like that. They didn't want to hear me swearing around their house, but they understood it was an art and what they did, so they let me have the CD, which was nice.
So then how did you go from, playing a broken 5-string guitar to, the project, which is Boo Seeka, which is a little bit more, I guess, I'd say subdued than The Offspring, and you're obviously not swearing like a sailor when you're up there.
No, well, I don't swear. I don't swear in the songs, but I have a tendency to swear quite a lot, revving up the crowd, which I gotta watch myself every now and then. But I get too hyped up. Um, I think I went through a massive kind of what's the right word? I guess I was just exposed to a lot of friends around me, especially growing up at school, that kind of got me into different genres. I was hanging out with people that were into the pop punk scene, and growing up being a surfer, and I kind of had two sets of friends when I first came to Newcastle. One half being the guys that bodyboarded, and the other half that were surfers. And there was always a divide at school of you weren't really cool if you were hanging out with both groups, but I didn't really give a shit at that point. And like you had the hardcore scene, and listening to like bands like Parkway Drive and Thursday and Blink-182 and all that kind of lot. And then I had a guy that I became really good friends with that was more into like um, Slipknot and Disturbed and stuff like that. And I started kind of getting my head around that. So I kind of went through a lot of different genres of learning guitar. And then I guess the biggest one was a very, very close friend of mine, still one of my best friends, Luke Elsley. We started a band in high school together called Benjaloo, and it was more in that Jack Johnson, Ben Harper, Beautiful Girls, John Butler kind of scene, and he really showed me that, and it made a lot of sense to me growing up with, stuff listening to Dad with America and Bread and the Harmonies and the whole coastal kind of thing that came with it. So when we started that, we got a couple of our other friends to come and create a band with us, but no one wanted to sing. We were all too scared to sing. And Luke's father said, all right, well, the only way to fix this for you boys is draw straws. So we drew straws, and I got the short straw, and I had to learn how to start singing. So I owe my singing career to a straw. And our music teacher was like, I think you should go in this music competition that Silverchair had won at the time. That was what this competition was most known for. And we won that, and that kind of started my next 9 years with my four best mates, where to us, the best job in the world at that point, and we weren't real necessarily worried about the money at that point. Not that we ever have been, or I ever have been. I guess it changes a little bit different when you got mortgages and whatnot. But as an 18-year-old kid, the best job in the world was to be in a shitty van with four of your mates traveling around Australia playing music, and that was 9 years of my life, and how I cut my teeth and learned how to write songs and how to perform in front of people. And I owe a lot to those four guys for everything that came to when Boo Seeka started.
So Boo Seeka has been around for, I think it's what about a decade now, or at least almost a decade since the first album.
Just yeah. Well, 2015 was when we dropped Kingdom Leader, and the first album was 2017.
That's right. Yeah, I'm getting all my numbers mixed up. But in that time, though, it often feels to me as though Boo Seeka isn't a name that you hear too much of on the mainstream side of things, which is a real shame because there is a lot of crossover and a lot of potential. I mean, the first album was top 10 and everything like that. But to me, it definitely feels like you've got an incredibly strong fan base that keeps you going, which I can imagine you'd be incredibly, grateful for, which is exactly what musicians would just, adore.
Yeah, I try to even, each to their own, but to me, I don't even call them fans. I just call them part of the Boo family, because I mean, honestly, without them, this thing doesn't exist. Like for Boo Seeker, it's definitely probably been more driven on getting more support by going out and playing live shows. I mean, I'm absolutely hopeless at social medias. My managers try to get me to do more every day, but I'm not really the kind of guy that, and I'm trying to learn, like, walking around with a camera stuck in my face all day, or the phone in front of my face. But there was just something natural, I guess, over that whole amount of time of playing with my schoolmates, that it's become natural to me to be playing live. I don't think it's because of being in front of people or liking that. I just think there's this sense of calmness that comes from me performing live, and that's how the Boo Seeker name, I guess, got out there so much, because we dropped Kingdom Leader, and then Kim Churchill asked us to go on the road with him literally 2 weeks after that dropped. At that point, we didn't even have enough music to play. I remember Sam and I driving down in the car, and I was literally making up songs in the car just to get through 30 minutes worth of music. So we kind of hit the ground running, and I think that first year we would have gone close to 200 shows around the world. And that's what we've been based on. I think Boo Seeker is known more so, I think, for being a live band, and I love that.
I mean, would, obviously 200 shows in such a quick amount of time. I mean, is that sort of thing overwhelming, or is it the sort of thing you had to sort of like learn to sort of like deal with quite quickly? Or was it sort of just a natural progression for someone who had spent a lot of time playing live?
Well, again, like, I don't I don't want to say the exact number, but I think those 200 shows somewhat felt so much easier for me, because with Benjaloo, the band with my friends, I mean, we were literally playing sometimes Tuesday to Sunday, if not Wednesday to Sunday every week. It just, like, and those gigs were at that point, like, I mean, we never got to a point where it was livable, but the more shows we did, the more, kind of money we had, at least to get a hotel room and stay on the road and have more adventures. And we weren't doing our sets, we were getting booked in as like a cover band. So we were playing basically an hour and a half of original music and an hour and a half of covers. So to go from playing 3.5 hour sets to only playing 30 minutes or 40 minutes on stage at that point, it felt like a breeze for me. So I was like, bring more, I
Of
was
course.
keen.
Right. And then, so away from the stage as well, you are also quite prolific as a music maker, producer, composer, whatever you want to call yourself. In that, it always feels like there's a new Boo Seeka release, either it be an album or a single or something. So, is that something that is organic in the sense that you're always creating, necessary in the sense that you sort of constantly need new product for the audience, or is it a bit of a healthy mix of both?
I definitely feel there was like when Sam and I first started Boo, and well, when I first wrote Kingdom Leader, Deception, Bang, and Fool was the first three songs I ever wrote for Boo Seeka. And I'd come out of Benjaloo, and that was, the kind of folk indie roots kind of vibe. And I wanted to start writing electronic music, and I had no idea how to do that. And the producer that we were working with at that time, and a very good friend of mine, Ian Pritchett, he came from doing music like The Beautiful Girls and Angus and Julia Stone. And I went to him saying, I had no money at the time. And he was like, that's fine, just come in, let's write some music together. And it basically is like, I guess even talking to Jay, who's in Boo Seeka now, he always talks about those first few songs and the first album as it was almost like the perfect mistake because we had no idea what we were doing. I was working with a folk indie roots producer and we were trying to write electronic music. And I think in a way it was the greatest mistake that helped me and us at the time to come up with, I guess, what Boo Seeka is now known for the sound of being quite diverse and not knowing what the next release is going to be. And it's something that I love being able to do as an artist. And I think with each release, I will always push the boundaries more personally for me. I'm not saying I'm groundbreaking to the point where there's nothing like anybody else, but I certainly enjoy now having my own releases and then working with other artists and being able to create with other artists in other genres, which is, an honor for me and something that just keeps the excitement in my mind and in my brain as a writer.
So on that topic of sort of pushing things forward as well, Boo Seeka has obviously had a few different eras over the years. And, it's been, you've been working with others, it's been a solo project, and now you're with Jay. So it still feels like, but it all feels quite seamless along the way. Like the early gear really sits nicely alongside the latest record. So has it been difficult to sort of navigate that and ensure that there's a consistent yet still progressive sound?
I think so. The big thing for me when I go into writing records is I really don't listen to that much music. I try to, if I do listen to music, I try to keep it more on a shuffle than listening to full length albums because I seem to get too influenced by a sound, so I don't want to listen to something from start to finish. And I really do try to cut myself off from listening to as much music as possible in the weirdest way possible. And I think that helps me and Jay definitely as well has kind of got to this point as well where you're not going in wanting to recreate a sound. And I think as an artist, that's something we all strive for is to have our own identity and our own sound. And I'm always chasing that. I feel like Between the Head and the Heart was the closest record that I could say I heard the influences too much, if that made sense. I could hear what I was listening to at that present time writing the record. I just moved to the Gold Coast. I was getting kind of very much in touch with going and listening to a lot of dance music and going to these underground kind of trance things and listening to a lot of Rufus and hanging out with Hayden James, and it was incredible. I think it's a great record, but I can hear the influences way more on that record than I can on Never Too Soon and Midnight Highlight, which is definitely something that I'm very proud of going back into that way that I go, this is kind of a mashup of the last two records into the third. And to me, it sounds more like me and more like us with Jay as well, of kind of having that a bit more of an identity of what Boo Seeka is, I guess.
And that seamlessly goes into my next question, which was, obviously the new album, which came out in January. So an album like this, what does it say about who Boo Seeka is in 2024?
Definitely in a lot happier place, that's for sure. Um, it's we definitely did this record a lot differently to Between the Head and the Heart. I think Between the Head and the Heart, I was personally going through a really, really rough um, stage in my life. Not that I really want to get into that, but I definitely used that record to really sit down and write songs to what I feel like I needed to say to myself, to get me through the rut that I was in. Where with Midnight Highlight, we went into this record with basically a blank canvas every day with no preconceived ideas, no half-written songs. And how I like to try to look at music is, we always get asked, what's your songs about? And, is it about this? And I try really hard to, not that I'm, trying to dodge the question, but to me, it really is looking like to me, looking at music or listening to music is like an abstract painting. If you might connect with it in a way that is a complete and utter different way than how I do with it. And if I tell you what that means to me, then you may not connect with that at all anymore, because behind the scenes what it's about now, and you go, it's kind of ruined it for me. So we really took that inspiration, and definitely something that Jay wanted to try as well, is going in, blank canvas, us kind of sitting down, starting a new song every day. I mean, it was a very long process, I got to say. It wasn't as quick as, getting in and doing a whole record in 2 weeks. It was 6 months of doing this, and we'd basically start writing a song in the morning. I'd write down some lyrics that I'd been thinking about that morning, hand it to Jay or the producer, Luke Palmer, not telling them what it meant to me, seeing if they were connecting with it in some way, shape or form, and then they would add to it. And it kind of just went around like a pass the parcel kind of thing, to a point where all three people in that room were connecting with this song in a totally different way. And it was a really cool experience to go through.
Because obviously, despite it being 6 months, it feels like it would have been a lot more, I guess, happier, if you will. Like this one felt like a much more enjoyable process for you, I'm guessing.
100%. I mean, where the song's still at that point where, in a day of complete and utter happiness, or looking forward to something that I was, being excited about it, I really went into that so much happier than what I did with Between the Head and the Heart, because it just, I really needed that album personally for me to get through the point of my life at that stage, because it was struggle street. So it was a really amazing experience doing Midnight Highlight, and to be doing it with Jay, which is an incredible artist in his own in his own way. He's in another project called Golding, and I love their music as well. And he's devoted his life to Boo Seeka, and I'm so honoured and thankful for him for doing that. But to have an incredible artist like himself to be bringing in new ideas, and then also to have an incredible producer, it was something I really wanted to try, and I personally think worked out really well.
And also, just on how you mentioned before about how you don't like to sort of explain what the songs are about. So if you're working with someone like Jay, do you also keep the sort of meaning from the song, I guess, hidden from him as well? Because to me, it would almost feel as though it's like you'd want to say, Jay, this is what this one's about. So you're able to sort of feel it in the way I am, to perform it the same way. But at the same time, it would be able to be like he interprets it in his own way as well, and you get a different and better performance out of it.
I think sometimes he probably silently knew what I was saying through a song without saying it to me. But I think there was definitely songs in that experience that he had no idea what I was talking about. But I mean, definitely not every song that we wrote connected the way that we wanted to and came out the other end. I mean, there's so many demos just sitting on loose computer, because it kind of went around in the circle that it was, and we just kind of came out going, nah, it's not really connecting for us anymore. And that was fine. I think it was okay to write something. We were basically writing a new song every day for the first 3 months. And then coming out of that, looking at the back end, and we were basically picking all of our favorites before we went back in and started working on them again. So I think he subconsciously probably knew what I was trying to say through a song, or if he started with an idea, same kind of thing. But We never literally spoke about what the idea was to start with.
Sort of leaving it up for interpretation. And
Exactly.
I'm just repeating the word interpretation. I thought I had a second one, but interpretation's what I'm going for. No, that makes total sense, and I guess it is sort of much more. Can't even think of the word. It makes for a better performance and a better sort of way of living with
Well,
the music as well,
yeah.
doesn't it?
I didn't want when Jay was able to have his say in it, or Luke. I didn't want to be like again. I didn't want them to go. Yeah, I'm just not really connecting with what you're trying to say here. And I think that was really cool because it kept an open book on where it could go instead of just a one-dimensional way of thinking about these lyrics.
Well, I think we should get down to the trusty chords portion of the podcast. So this part is all about the music that made you. So we're stretching the 1, 3, and 5 format of the standard chord, which I know, as you said, you can't read music, so this is an explainer for everyone here. And here, this is where I'm asking you one artist, 3 albums, and 5 songs you can always turn to. So the first question for you here, Ben, is who is the one artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
If I'd have to say one, I would have to say Coldplay.
Right.
Um, and this will probably go into one of my 3 albums. As I remember hearing Parachutes and just being completely and utterly addicted to the thing. And I think from a melodic sense, if I ever do feel like I'm somewhat stuck when I am writing, and again, I don't listen to that much music, but I've always seemed to got somewhat if I was sitting in a room with Chris Martin, what would my brain come out with, kind of thing. So I think I definitely would have to say Coldplay. I feel like those first 3 albums were very iconic in my life and something that I would have to say would be up there with probably my favorite artist.
They're definitely one of those artists where, like, I think a lot of their music is overshadowed by the singles because if you sort of look past the singles, you see so many great songs. I mean, the one I always recommend to people is from A Rush of Blood to the Head, the song Amsterdam. That one feels
Mm-hmm.
like it's always like really slept on compared to things like Clocks, for example. And
Yeah,
they're
and I mean, I think as a lyricist as well, how Chris, he's one of those artists for me from a lyrical point of view where it's like it's so simple yet can have so many meanings, and it's like, why the hell didn't I think about that or think of that of just being able to say it so simply in a song and not always having to be so abstract, but yet it just comes out in this beautiful melodic sense, and I guess that's definitely been something that's been influential for me as a writer.
and so the next question I had was, the 3 albums that impacted you the most. So you obviously mentioned Coldplay. So would you be picking Parachutes as one of those albums?
It would be, if I had to pick one Coldplay record, it would rather be Parachutes, Rush Blood to the Head, or Viva La Vida.
Mhm.
I'd say I just have to go, I think, with Parachutes for their album because it was just, I don't know, it was something that, hearing Yellow for the first time on MTV or Rage at that point, it was just like, who is this guy and what is this song and what is this band? And I just remember sitting in my room just constantly playing that CD over and over and over again to the point where I could literally pick up the guitar and play every song. So I definitely have to go. If I was picking one Coldplay record, it'd be Parachutes.
And for the other 2 albums that you'd pick, what would you pick there?
I would say Moby Play would be definitely another ginormous record that I still listen to very, very frequently. There's something about that record that I just think is completely and utterly timeless.
Oh, it's
Um,
flawless from the get-go to the let-go, isn't it?
it is. It's incredible, and I think that had a huge play in my life at the beginning of Boo Seeka, where that was just something that I would say was definitely an influence of why I wanted to go into electronic music. I wouldn't say necessarily the Boo Seeka sounds anything like Moby, but it was definitely an album that was very influential in my life and something that I still listen to constantly. Um, Third record might come as a bit of a random one for a lot of people, but I'd have to say another record that was flawless from front to back for me was David Gray, White Ladder.
Oh, yes. That's a wonderful
Um,
album. Yeah.
just again, incredible, incredible melodies, and I think something that was always a big thing for me is listening to melodies and and lyrics, and you listen to Chris Martin in Coldplay, you know it's Chris Martin, you know it's Coldplay. It's just he's got one of those most, a distinctive voice, and I feel like that's the same with David Gray. He's just got this voice that it's him, and I think I definitely got very addicted to the voice, and maybe the way that I was somewhat singing melodies when I was trying to learn how to write songs was definitely because of those two artists.
And the last part here is, the 5 songs you can always turn to. So whether it be for comfort, for excitement, or anything at all, your 5 trusty songs.
I probably have to go. Well, I'll go a Coldplay song. I remember the first time I heard Clocks come out. It was just like, I feel like, when there's like those influential songs that come out and then you somewhat hear the next 30 artists trying to do something like that.
Oh, yes.
uh, um, it was definitely like, wow, I haven't heard any kind of piano sound like this before, and the way that he was doing it. So I'd say that's, I've always find myself singing that song. If I had to go to a Moby song, oh, that's a hard one. Hang on, while I think of my other artists, I'm going to quickly look at the record because I can't pick um,
'Cause
exactly what it is.
Moby's Play is so hard to pick one is on there, for example, just because I think every song on that album was actually like, I think every song was like released not as a single, but like licensed for like a sync deal or something. It was the first album to ever have that. It just shows you how powerful all the songs are on that one.
Oh man, and I think again, like I think the big thing that I've gotten out of, sorry, we're kind of going off course here, but I think the big thing that I probably took away from Moby is that cinematic sound and I think that was a big playing part in a lot of the kind of the musical direction that I took. It's not so much with the first singles with Kingdom Leader, but maybe more so with like Fool and Deception Bay. Just the amount of layers that I personally thought he had, but he's been breaking down his songs, and there's actually not as many as I anticipated. But I just love that cinematic sound. It sounded like you said, every song was in a movie or on an ad, and that's something that I definitely got influenced by. I'd probably have to say, "Why Does My Heart Feel So Bad?" I think that's probably the one that I'd go to for that. What else would I go to? I'd have to go Black Keys, Gold on the Ceiling. I feel like that always puts a really good smile on my face. Babylon by David Gray, and one more.
Yeah, we've got one left.
Yeah, I know this all sounds like really commercial, but I think another really influential song in my life. And to be brutally, I hate saying this because I don't want to sound like everyone, but there's definitely been a few artists that have done this song, and in my personal humble opinion, and it's only my my only personal opinion, but I feel like there's definitely been a couple of car wrecks. Sorry, the pun, but car wrecks of this song. But Fast Car by Tracy Chapman.
Right.
To me, that was just a song that, again, a very influential voice, a very influential album. It was definitely something that I listened to with my mum, and she still plays it. And it just doesn't matter how many times people try to recreate that song. There's just nothing like I can listen to the original a million times over, but one and done with a couple of other ones that have come out.
Yeah, there's something so vulnerable about that original one, and I don't think any cover can ever capture that. It's the same as like Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Everyone tries to sort of recreate that, but you can't capture the emotion with which it was originally made.
Exactly, and I think that now I think about it, I would nearly almost go. I don't know which one I would pick now. It's like got a million songs running in my head, but it'd be rather Trace Chapman Fast Car or Nick Drake Pink Moon. I think when it comes to acoustic music, that was two albums and two artists that were very iconic in my life and records that I love listening to.
And both of them are, well, I should say, Nick Drake and Tracy Chapman are both artists who feel like they're very underrated in the grand scheme of things, but highly influential in terms of what they brought.
Yeah, it's like especially with this whole the Tracy Chapman thing. It was like back in the day, it was like you'd talk to people and they're like, don't know who Tracy Chapman is, and now you hear people go, oh, have you heard that new Fast Car song? It's like, yeah, it's
A little bit
definitely
late to
not
the
the
party,
original.
aren't we, mate? Yeah. Amazing. Well, Ben Gumbleton, I just want to say thank you so much for being generous with your time today, and also for being part of the Trusty Chord podcast.
Thank you very much for the support, man. I really appreciate it.
thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you're able to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on whatever your preferred platform of choice may be. I'm not holding any grudges if you don't do that, so feel free to ignore this bit and go about your day. But hey, I certainly wouldn't complain if you did. If you're eager to follow along on social media, you can find me on all the main channels, Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. Over on Twitter, it's Trusty Chords Pod, because why would they make things easy for anyone? There's also a blog for this podcast over on my own website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's TYLERJENKE/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. You can find entries on each of the episodes as they go live, links to all the appropriate parts of this podcast, including artists, albums, and 5 songs chosen each week, and an accompanying playlist too. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can swing me a few dollars to support this podcast if you feel so inclined. As always, there's no obligation to do so, but I'm forever appreciative of those who do. And of course, the lovely messages have been constant and appreciated, so I need to extend massive thanks to everyone who reaches out each and every week to talk about this podcast. Lastly, I need to thank Ben Gumbleton for being part of the podcast this week. I also need to express my gratitude to Jack at On The Map PR for helping organise this chat as well. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.